Hidden Figures is a 2016 historical fiction centered on the narratives of black women who worked at NASA during the 1960s. The film is noteworthy in part for its multiple awards, which include the BET Award for Best Movie, the NAACP Award for Outstanding Motion Picture, the Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance, and others. The film was ranked in the top 10 films of 2016 and has since remained relevant in popular culture, in media, and in academia. Its popularity, as well as its critical content, make it a good artifact for study, especially in terms of gender communication. In this analysis, I will deploy the concepts of genderlect and speech codes to help explain some of the ways Hidden Figures critiques the gender norms of 1960s NASA culture. According to Deborah Tannen, there are substantial differences in the way men and women communicate. Since language and dialect are foundational to culture, differences in the way men and women talk mean that we can see them as culturally distinct from one another. For this analysis, an important aspect of genderlect is the understanding that men practice report talk, while women practice rapport talk. Report talk is a self-focused, masculine, and monologic form of communication that often brings attention and clout to the individual. Conversely, rapport talk is an other-focused form of communication that seeks to form relationships and support community. In relation to the concept of speech codes, rapport talk can be understood as a collectivist form of communication, and report talk can be understood as individualist. Speech codes are socially constructed rules and norms that dictate communicative conduct in specific cultural contexts. NASA is one of those contexts. As depicted in the film, the work environment at NASA in the 1960s was deeply segregated along gender lines. There were particular spaces where work was being done almost entirely by men, mostly white, and other spaces where work was being done primarily by women, mostly black. The film clearly depicts male-dominated spaces as more individualist and female spaces as more collectivist. In the male spaces, workstations were more separated. Communication between co-workers in these spaces only happened when necessary, and interactions were almost exclusively limited to the exchange of information, to problem solving, and to self-promotion. One character who demonstrated this well was Paul Stafford. Mr. Stafford was clearly offended and felt personally threatened when Katherine Johnson, a black woman who transferred into his department, was assigned the task of checking his work. He even went so far as to verbally diminish Miss Johnson, calling her a dummy check. Although hurt by his comments, Miss Johnson remained calm and respectful. By reacting this way, Miss Johnson demonstrated a desire to avoid confrontation and maintain peace, evidence of a more collectivist style of communication. This behavior is akin to communicative norms within the film's female spaces, where workers communicated more openly about a wider variety of topics, including their feelings and worries, and where they regularly celebrated individual achievements as though they were accomplishments shared by the group. Interestingly, the longer Miss Johnson worked within the male spaces, the greater impact she had on the men who worked there. That is, over time, the male-dominated spaces became more communicative, more supportive, as well as less isolating and less competitive. One of the most impactful moments in the film is when one of the key daily reports, which originally contained only Paul Stafford's name, is shown with both Katherine Johnson and Paul Stafford's name. This speaks to the concepts of sociology and rhetoric as they relate to speech codes. Sociology refers to the way speech codes create linkages between people, as well as which symbolic resources can be used to bolster those linkages. The film returned often to the moment at the end of each day when Katherine Johnson typed up the daily report, showing that time and time again she listed Paul Stafford as the author of the work she had done. Over time, she made attempts to put her own name on the reports. However, she was forced to remove it and was firmly reminded that women were not fit to author reports. Gender-based rules about who could be listed as report authors served to reinforce the notion that men were considered superior to women at NASA. Thus, the display of a report authored by both Johnson and Stafford near the end of the film rhetorically signaled that a paradigm shift had occurred in NASA's culture. The code had been modified and had become, at least somewhat, less individualist and more collectivist.